And of course, we've had some technical difficulties. Back to what I was saying. Seinfeld ends with everyone in jail. You're probably like, well, yeah, I mean, they're horrible people. They should be in jail. And yes, you would be 100% correct. These things happen. People go to jail. I'm not downing anyone who's ever been in jail. I have plenty of friends that have been in jail, but let's not digress. Back to the subject at hand, and George and his hookers and pissing in public and everything that kind of made George into Professor Rothschild. You're probably like, wait a minute. Yeah. So, we know George got arrested for peeing in public. We know that's a no-no. We know nowadays you become a registered sex offender. But didn't happen then. Then we have George killing his fiancée. Yes, he did kill his fiancée. Even though, okay, I get the argument of, well, it was accidental. Yeah, maybe George was just seeing how far he could take things. Because if you look at it, George picked the envelopes that that him and Susan were using for their wedding invitations, right? Okay. Well, Susan died due to the glue on the invitations being toxic. So we'll leave that one up in the air. But aside from that, George has shown numerous times other behaviors. I mean, he tried to Mickey his previous boss in the bar. So you have that. Then he was constantly lying about where he was. So much so that at one point they believed George to be dead. And they reported to his parents that George is dead. So you have that aspect. But it doesn't stop there. But we'll circle back. Now, those of you who have seen the episode of Criminal Minds, which I am referring to, that George is in, if you haven't, it's season 4. It's called Masterpiece. And be like, well, Professor Rothschild had a brother. Okay. There's a workaway with this, too. What's to say George didn't have an older brother? An older brother who could have been driven away and pushed away by their neurotic parents. I mean, look at the behavior of the parents, people. Nature versus nurture. I'm going to throw this one to nurture because, yeah, I mean, George's parents are shown as not necessarily being the best parents. So, George could have had a brother, an older brother that no one knew about, that was driven away by the activities of Festivus. More importantly, the feats of strength activities in Festivus. Because anyone who watched Seinfeld knows Festivus is a holiday in which not only do you air grievances with your family and whoever else is participating in the Festivus activities. That's not all. They have feats of strength in which you prove your strength to your family. I mean, that's a little extreme. Come on. We're all thinking it. I'm just saying it. So you have that. It doesn't stop there. Because when Festivus is even brought up, George is shown as being traumatized from it. Like, traumatized. Like, still has issues with Festivus. So, of course, you know what's to say that he didn't have another brother who just up and left and became a serial killer prior. So we have that. You're probably like, alright, come on. Get it over with. You're going too far. Oh, but I'm not done. I have a list. So, I mean, what to get into next? His issues with brunettes. Rothschild is shown in Criminal Minds as having issues with brunettes. Now, hold on. And yes, George was engaged to a blonde, and his first victim was a blonde, Susan. Rothschild's victim preference was brunettes. Now, I know. It seems like a stretch, but hear me out. The hooker incident with George, that woman was a brunette. Elaine, who is always torturing George and Jerry, is a brunette. George had dated brunettes in the series multiple times. So it could be said that, you know what? Victimology was there the whole time. Then you get into, well, how did George become Professor Rothschild? Well, let's think about this. It is said in Criminal Minds, point blank, that while Rothschild is a professor, he is not a teacher. He has never used his degree. So, they know that. Now, George, at one point, in one particular episode of Seinfeld, becomes exceptionally smart. He sits down and he, is going through all of this to become smart. And he does. And while, supposedly becomes smart because he stops having sex, yada, yada, yada. Point is, it's shown that George does have the capacity for a very high intellect. So when you take that into consideration, what do you do when you're in prison? You can do a lot in prison. And they offer schooling. So, while they were in jail, who's to say that George didn't actually become a professor? And you're like, alright, well, that still doesn't cover everything. You're right, it doesn't. But listen to this. The Green River serial killer got away with what he was doing for so long because his records were locked and wiped away. So, there is proof that our government, to help reintegrate people into society, depending upon the crime, will make their criminal records disappear. You with me on this? So, George's criminal record disappears. He changes his name to Professor Rothschild, thus giving him the actual title of professor. And he can get away with it. I mean, think about it. If the Green River Killer did it, and our own government, our own agencies were willing to make the Green River Killer's record disappeared after he'd been convicted of murdering 2 children. 2 children! They gave this man a new identity, basically, and a new life. They locked up his criminal record so no one could access it at all. So when he started killing again, there was no way to initially tie him to the murders. You get what I'm saying here? You staying with me? So, we have that. Okay. Now, there's other similarities between George and Rothschild, aside from, they're played by the same actor, yes. But if you look at the characters specifically, which is what this is about looking at these 2 characters and seeing how they fit or don't. Rothschild, he liked a very clean appearance. He also liked to appear to have more than he actually did. Like, well, why is this important? Well, let's think about it. George, financially, was very competitive with everyone around him. And he didn't like when Elaine paid for his coffee, he turned it into a whole big thing. He also lied to Susan's parents and told them he was staying at his house in the Hamptons. And when he was asked why he was going with that story, he's like, I've been lying about my income for years. Okay. So, what do we know about Rothschild? Well, first of all, when we see Rothschild, he's impeccably dressed. Now, you're like, but here's the thing. Let's say George's parents died. I mean, they were old in Seinfeld. So we can safely assume that, alright, parents died. They were stated to have a good amount of money. So, George stood to inherit a bunch of money. Meaning, he could actually pull off the expensive appearance. Probably like, alright dude, you're going too far. But I'm not. So with that in mind, look at it again. George Costanza could have easily become Professor Rothschild. Between the time spent in jail, earning the title of professor, the fact that we know our government is willing to help in certain situations, certain people restart their life. Okay, we have all that. You know what else we have? The fact that George had committed crimes in Seinfeld and been charged for them. You're like, yeah, you already said that. Okay. But he also has been shown to go to extremes when he is interested in women. But he also is shown as very timid with approaching females as well. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Rothschild is a serial killer, but he cannot stand confrontation with a female. He cowers, which means he has issues with interaction with women. So we have that. Okay, that's still not enough for you? Alright. What else do we need to convince you that they are one in the same? Like, alright, so the argument's kind of floppy, but you're seeing some of the points now. The fact of the matter is that George could have learned a whole bunch of new tricks while he was in jail. He could have gathered new ways to do things, new tricks and tools. I mean, all sorts of people go to jail. And Rothschild the professor wanted to be smarter than everyone else in the room. And believed he could be. And believed he could play everyone into doing what he wanted, when he wanted. You're probably like, what does that have to do with George? Well, you see, George, too, liked to be the smartest one in the room. He also liked to appear that he had more going for him than anyone else. So, there's another common link right there in the personality. I mean, like I said, it's just kind of one of those things. One of those, like, random little things I noticed. Like, hey, you know what? George Costanza could have turned into Professor Rothschild that we see in Criminal Minds, who has killed 7 women and taken children hostage. And even at the end of the episode, he does not attack anyone from the front. He goes and attacks them from behind. So, that seems a little George-like, doesn't it? Knowing that someone else can take him. So, what do you all think? Is George Costanza Professor Rothschild in Criminal Minds? Is George Costanza murdering his fiancée, being arrested for peeing in public, fighting with a hooker enough to convince you that, hey, maybe they really are one and the same? Or what if it's not? What if what you needed to convince you was the fact that George ended Seinfeld in jail? Rothschild, we know nothing about prior to that episode, and they really don't delve into his history. They say he had a fiance. Think about that. George's parents are shown to be verbally and emotionally manipulative, slightly abusive. Come on, Festivus. Let's air our grievance and beat each other and test the strength. While it sounds super cool, and I am totally down for a holiday like that, like, come on. I will totally throw hands, eat some good food, and move on till next year and do it again. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about how nature and nurture could have turned George Costanza from Seinfeld into Professor Rothschild in Criminal Minds. Let me know what you all think. Alright. And with that being said, there is more content coming. I'm gonna hop back more into, like, I'm thinking of Saints Row versus GTA, where I sit down with Kyle and he and I kind of go back and forth as to why one is superior to the other and debate it, because your girl loves Saints Row. He loves GTA. Just a little back and forth. A lot of, like, game stuff that's coming up that's really cool, that has my attention. The Mass Effect remaster, which I fell into a black hole of and played through it multiple times. I've replayed Dragon Age Inquisition. You know, so we have these new games. I'm gonna go see Spider-Man No Way Home Saturday, so I can do a review on that. We can talk about that. Either way, there's a lot coming, and I missed you all, but I am back. Crisis has kind of been solved. Take care of yourselves. Bye.